If you run into a problem, if you need to partner with another business, if you have something that you need, who are you going to call? Have you ever heard the old African proverb? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Today's guest, David Gow, has gone far. He's also gone pretty fast too. He's the founder of Gow Media. He currently serves as their chairman. He has brought businesses from IPO to partnership and still leads there. He is a member of Goose Capital, and he is very involved in ecosystem development here in Houston through the Cannon. Amazing places that bring entrepreneurs and businesses together in a co-location form. And he's going to talk to us today all about the power of building a strong leadership network externally and internal to the business. You don't want to miss it. Let's dive in right now. David, thank you so much for joining me on the Leadwell podcast and talking about why it is so important for us to build networks as leaders.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So as I was researching and as you shared, got to look at, you've built Gow Media. You have built a sports network. You have an ecosystem that you are working on here in Houston. Kind of the thread through all of this is you build businesses where you absolutely must work with other people in other organizations. And can you talk about, was this an intentional thing? Was this something that you found yourself in after you started doing this? How did you get into where building networks was so crucial to your businesses and to how you lead?
Well, thanks. It's great to be here. You know, it is interesting you asked that question because when I go back to why did we start Gow Media, it was a window of time when I'd sold out of a business and had not figured out what I wanted to be when I grew up. I was wrestling with that question in probably my early 40s at the time. And I really landed on three criteria for what I wanted to do next. But the first one was to be a part of something where the mission of the work exceeded the day-to-day tasks, where we were tied to something exciting and bigger than what we were doing every day. And of course, when most people look at their day-to-day tasks, what they do, they're not particularly exciting. I mean, if you're an accountant, you're booking entries. If you're a salesperson, you're making calls. But to be tied to something bigger than the tasks was a really exciting opportunity for me. It's something I really wanted to pursue. And media seemed like a platform, a way to do that. Because one of the great things about media is that we can use our platforms to support lots of great causes across the city. And so we do promote as regularly as we can wonderful causes that are making a mark and changing lives in Houston. And we love to do so. So that was one premise. And then the second thing is you talk about building networks. You can't build a media company without being deeply connected to your community and meeting lots of people and touching lots of bases. And that was certainly true when we got started. We were started purely as a sports radio company, but it's become even more so now because we're multi-platform and our content sites cover all kinds of topics: culture map, sports map, innovationmap.com. And what those platforms do, of course, is they connect us to certain communities, the innovation ecosystems in Houston, the cultural communities and the charity events of the city, and then, of course, the sports community and the sports fans. So yes, a part of being in media is being deeply connected to the community and building those networks.
So what I find so interesting as I look at this and I look at you and others that build these is the resilience, the collaboration, and a lot of the shared success and struggles that come with doing work this way. But what are some of the things that you have found that have been extremely positive that maybe you weren't expecting going in to being so reliant on and building such a strong kind of network all around Gow Media and ecosystem development like you and others are doing at the Cannon?
Hmm. The thing is, of course, to build a network, I guess I might say two things. One is you got to show up and be out and about and be willing to meet with people. I'm a little bit of an introvert, and so it takes some energy to get out into the workplace and to meet folks. And uh, but the energy is always repaid back
Mm.
many times over. Every relationship has some real nuggets out of it that it's always been enriching and certainly worth the energy that I put forth. And so being outbound and going out and connecting with people is certainly an endemic part of building a network.
Mhm.
But the second thing is that surprised me a little bit, and this one has taken me longer to do well, is I hate to admit when I don't have an answer or I need help. I hate to admit that I need help. But what I find is if I go to people and I tell them that I need help, that I'm in a tough spot or that I don't know the answer, that's actually a way to get connected to people probably in a faster way than if I come in with all the answers. People love to connect with you when they realize that you have some of the same challenges, dilemmas, highs and lows, and ups and downs that they do. And so getting to a place where I was willing to admit my need was another key lever in building a network of relationships, friendships, and business acquaintances.
That is so powerful. I mean, we forget that. I forget that if I'm the one that likes to give and give and give, that one I need to receive, and two that other people love to reciprocate just as I do. What are some of the greatest things that have come out of that when you have said, "Hey, here is a need." Is it space? Is it people? Is it collaboration on events? What are some of the outcomes of you stepping out and saying, "Hey, I need help in this way or in this area"?
Hmm. I think what's been great for me is this notion that I don't have to feel total responsibility, the full weight of the outcome of the entity on my own shoulders. It's been wonderful to have people outside the organization and people inside the organization to feel ownership for outcomes at the company. And I I've been uplifted by that, by people's willingness to help and be supportive. It's interesting with leadership and thinking about internally in the organization. For a good long time, I used to try to walk the halls like I had every answer, like I was the one with all the plan. And that maybe made some people feel like, oh, their leader knows where we're going, and that gave them some comfort.
Mhm.
But I think equally so, maybe even more so, our team, our employees wanted to be part of the problem solving effort.
Yeah.
So to engage them that way, to say, hey, this is something we're wrestling with as an entity, come and engage with us on how we handle this particular situation or how we chase a particular opportunity. It's not always challenges, but it might be a new opportunity and formulate the opportunity alongside us. Boy, that inclusivity is really great for the whole organization.
And what a powerful awareness, at least I'm getting it right now, the reminder of building networks isn't just about building connections to help you, but what I just heard you say is include people in what we are in fact working on. And that
Yes.
creates in and of itself a more well-connected, resilient, stronger kind of network, internal to the organization or external.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's an overused expression, but I do believe uh, people felt like we had an open door policy that somebody could come in. I mean, I had to temper that a little bit sometimes because you could have a line coming out the door, but
Especially as an
there are
introvert, you
some,
probably had like, I am open door and in this way.
right. Only these times,
Yeah.
right? Don't, but no, I mean, there's obviously a moment where you've got to go off and do your own individual work. But at the same time, I do feel like people felt like we had an open door. There was an opportunity to come and talk through questions about the company. And that, I think, enabled relationships, and relationships are the foundation for soaring as an organization. And those relationships were something, when I look back on my time at Gow Media, it's the relationships that I find the most fulfilling. It's the people who grew, people who were transformed, people who came in as one person and left as another person. And when I look back, those things transcend the business success. Now you have to make payroll, you've got to be profitable, but to to get beyond that and to have something where you can connect with people, build relationships, and use that as the foundation for growth, I think that's a really great step for the company.
I love hearing you talk about doing that with people. That bleeds over into the work that you do. You also have Goose Capital where you do early stage investment, and this has also
Right.
led into some of the ecosystem development that you are a part of, especially here in Houston. For those that don't know what that term ecosystem development means, like myself, can you explain to us exactly what that means and how you are thinking about ecosystem development in a community or through a variety of businesses?
You bet. So I think the concept of an ecosystem is simply that if we bring different companies together and co-locate them and create programs that will unite them or enable connections, that by their being together, they will accomplish more than if they're all operating independently. And so the illustration of that, as we were talking about, the Cannon is a big innovation hub on the west side of town. There are actually other locations now, some really attractive locations, but the Cannon on the west side of town is sort of the flagship facility on the west side. And one of the great things that happens there to show how ecosystems can develop is lots of young entrepreneurial businesses, entrepreneurs will come and locate there. There are educational programs that are very, very useful for these entrepreneurs. There's community building activities, such as so the champagne room down at the end of the hall. If somebody closes a big VC round, everybody runs down there at the end of the day. They ring a bell, they drink the champagne, they toast the company, and they celebrate wins together, and they endure challenges together. And so when you think about educational programs, community building, and even things like a mentor network, an angel network, what happens is by co-locating all these businesses, you create a set of resources that enable companies to scale faster. And that's the benefit of an ecosystem.
Yeah, it becomes a thing that starts to feed itself, and
You bet.
and what I heard you say is that you put all these things together. You guys start to facilitate it, but you are really saying that hey, part of this is we also have to be proximate. Like we might have the best intentions, but if we're not actually around each other doing work or life together, we're not ever actually going to do it.
Well, I mean, I'll just highlight how hard entrepreneurialism is. The highs are really, really high, the lows are really, really low. And for an entrepreneur to be off in some remote office somewhere doing this on his or her own is really, really challenging.
Mhm.
But to put that entrepreneur in an ecosystem of other entrepreneurs, I think greatly enhances the probability of success.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. We start to uh, seek other people. We start to run and be motivated and behave
Yep.
like those that are winning around us. Where sometimes we're our own worst enemy, sitting all alone, not closing a deal, and thinking that the world is about to end. So as you are in there and you have these networks, you also have extremely, I wouldn't say volatile, but they're just very responsive and connected to the economy and to kind of uh, big wins and maybe fast failures. From media to capital to again building this ecosystem with property. What have some of those ups and downs look like?
Well, the easy one to describe is media in this sense. When we founded Gow Media, we were solely a sports radio station. And that was before Twitter even existed. And so we were in the old media world. And then along came Twitter and Instagram and all these other platforms. And it's just amazing to see how media has sort of fragmented and evolved over the years. I mean, here we are, you're creating a media outlet
Mhm.
and you are going direct to the public through your own work. It
Yeah.
used to be, wasn't that long ago, 15, 20 years ago, that if you really wanted to build audiences, you had to be part of a big entity, a broadcast entity. But now there's been this fragmenting and all these changes and all these new platforms where audiences have gone. And so it's a radically different world. And I would say that it has felt like ever since we started Gal Media, we were always working to catch up to or get ahead of the next trend in
Mm,
media. So here's an illustration. When we started, we were sports radio only, but what we perceived is that ad dollars, and we were dependent upon advertising dollars for our business, that ad dollars were migrating out of old media radio and into new media digital.
mm.
And so it was imperative for us to spread our wings and get beyond just radio. Interestingly, listenership didn't change that much. According to Nielsen ratings, our listenership was still pretty rock solid and stable. But the ad dollars were migrating. They loved the accountability of digital, and they loved the shiny new toy that was digital.
Yeah, none of us ever
All
like
that
shiny
said,
new toys.
no, no, never, never. So we went out and bought our own shiny new toy, which was Culture Map.
Mhm.
CultureMap.com had been around for about 10 years by the time we bought it. It had built a large and loyal following, but they were struggling to monetize what they had built. It was a standalone. It needed to be part of a greater whole. And so to buy Culture Map was a really good move for us because then we were positioned in front of all those ad dollars coming to digital. And it gave us a platform, Culture Map did, to launch these other digital content sites, which we have: Sports Map, Innovation Map, and now Energy Capital HTX. So it's been a good move for us, but it was one that was required by all of the ever changing landscape in media.
Yeah. How amazing, because as you said, that whole space has changed, and like us, we have the podcast, which is part of our media thing. We also self-publish a book, all of which was not possible. And you have
That's right.
steered and kind of gone through that entire exchange that I'm sure had tremendous amount of ups and downs, and having to sacrifice what once worked for what may or may not work, and just the
Yes.
the exhilaration and the exhaustion that comes with that.
Well, yes, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, and never more so than when COVID hit. I mean, when you step back and think about it, when COVID hit, a lot of businesses were required to shut down. And so, of course, they weren't going to spend any money on marketing. Why would a sports bar say, hey, come in and see us on Thursday night football? Because they weren't even open. So
Mhm.
everybody slashed their media spend quite significantly. I think our revenues were down around 45 to 50% year over year
Mm.
at the peak of the COVID crisis. And that was a real challenge because we had an inability to make money, and we had a lot of employees who were on the payroll, people whom we wanted to have around once we got to a post COVID world. But the question was, could we keep them to the post COVID world? Could we hold it all together during that stretch? And that was an extraordinary challenge that required a whole lot of effort and a lot of conversations in the company.
Yeah. How did it play out for you all?
So I guess I'd say two or three things. First is, and I love this about the team we had, but rather the pitch was I went to them and said, look, we're going to have to cut costs by about 15 to 20%. And we could cast out 15 to 20% of our employees, or we could keep the employees. Let's not cast them out into an uncertain job market in the midst of COVID. Let's keep those employees and everyone take a 15 to 20% pay cut with the idea of shared sacrifice so that we
Mhm.
would all take a hit in the short term to enable us to keep the team together and to avoid casting people out into an uncertain job market. And so that was step one. And then step two, of course, we were fortunate we were able to get into the PPP business, the payroll protection plan the
Mhm.
government allotted. And those two steps, some payroll reductions and the government funding, enabled us to navigate through that time. But it was still a challenge because if you think about it, when we wanted to bring the advertisers back, when they were ready to open their doors again, we had to sort of resell them. It wasn't sort of, hey, let's just roll your plan over to the next year. We had to reconvince them that this thing that they had done previously was now going to be a good thing again. And
Mhm.
it took some time. Thankfully, business is back. We're above where we were in 2019 pre COVID, but it took some time. It took, well, a couple of years to sort of build back the business brick by brick, and we finally got there.
I'm curious about your sacrifice and the collective sacrifice and how that kind of really solidified that network at Gow, and probably like you see in other places when there is this shared sacrifice. Organizations that we work with who kept people and made sacrifices for that to happen are reporting
Yeah,
higher retention, way different kind of post COVID employee engagement, everything. And is it playing out similar for you all?
it is. We have great retention rates. We rarely lose people. And maybe part of that is the way we went through COVID, the shared sacrifice of the collective effort to get through it. I think part of it is we're fortunate to be in media. I mean, everybody wants to be in media, right? In some way, it's fun. It's exciting to be telling the stories of what's going on across the city. And so, yes, usually when we get people into the realm of media, they want to stick around, unless they're advancing onto a bigger, better platform. We've had guys who were local who've gone national,
Mm.
and that's always a fun thing to see some of our people graduate that way. But that's a good loss, right? A healthy loss. It's a loss where somebody has really achieved something, and we can all take pride in their growth.
So some of the things that I'm taking away is just the power of building a network, both externally and internally, that in casting the vision with this greater mission than any of the day-to-day work, and really including and inspiring folks to go that way. If somebody's listening and they're sitting there thinking, oh my goodness, I feel all of the weight of that solo responsibility, there's nothing shared. If I'm thinking, well, you're saying to ask people for help or to try to build that bridge, and I don't even have a person. What's something that you would give them as advice or encouragement to start?
Well, I do believe that there's more help out there than one might naturally think. And going to business networking events, you can stumble into lots of people who are very useful, helpful, and thoughtful. Uh, I'm amazed at some people who will reach out to me on LinkedIn. We don't really know each other, but they may be a friend of a friend, or there's some mutual connection, and they're just asking for a cup of coffee. And I think it's hard to say no to people who are just seeking help and who are earnest about it and trying to build a good business. And I think there's more help out there than people believe instinctively. And so I would just encourage everyone to reach out, connect, and find ways to, uh, yeah, build a network and build trusted relationships and folks who can be great thought partners
Mm.
and maybe even accountability partners.
Yeah. And the way that you and I got connected to do this podcast today was through
Right.
a mutual
That's
friend
right.
who is a super connector, a great collaborator, said, you all got to get together and talk. And by the way, do this show. And so we were the benefit of that as well. And I'm about to ask you what you would say it is to lead well. But before we do, where would you send anyone that's listening if they want to learn more about Gow Media, about the ecosystem development you're doing here in Houston through the Canon, and any of your other work? Where should we send people?
You bet. So our biggest website, Gow Media, is culturemap.com. And there's something on Culturemap for everybody, which is one reason I love that site because we are covering food, fun, lifestyle, travel, society, all kinds of arts. It's amazing. Culturemap.com is a wonderful resource for the city and where to go and what to do. In terms of leadership, the number one principle I keep thinking about and trying to implement well is speaking the truth in love.
Hmm.
We have to have lots of hard conversations, but I think we have a model for it. It actually comes out of the Bible: truth in love. Lead with affirmation of the people, lead with your connection to them, have a relationship with them. And from that place, from that vantage point, there's an opportunity to speak the truth, sometimes the hard truth, about needs, performance development, objectives, things that need to be accomplished. It all starts with a relationship, and that's the foundation that enables you to speak the truth.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, David. Would you consider that your answer to what does it mean to you to lead well is speak truth in love, kind, hard truth with care and compassion?
Yes, that is my answer to that question. And I'll give one illustration is that unfortunately, as is often the case, we've had to let some people go for
Mhm.
different windows of time. They just weren't a fit. And it's a strange dynamic, but often, maybe this is true in media, but I think it's true in a lot of places. When you terminate somebody, when you cast them out, when they're ready to go on to another job, when you decided they're not a fit at the company, there's something in the company where everybody wants to say, well, he or she was never really this, or he or she never did that well. There's sort of a collective statement about that person that's somewhat negative. And I think it's in part, it's the organization's collective sense that they need to justify why that person's gone. And so they come up with these negative reasons. And what we try to do is separate the individual from the decision to terminate them.
Mhm.
And the individual has great worth. We like that person. No one we fired is anybody we didn't like. They're actually wonderful people. They're a part of our community, but they just weren't a good fit. They weren't doing the right job, or maybe we even miscast them. Maybe it was our fault. But the point is that when we're letting somebody go, we really work hard internally to still honor them as a
Mm.
person. And then even after they're gone, we try to keep them in the fold. We'll have company happy hours. We'll still invite them. We want them to still feel like they're still cared for and important to us as individuals, even if they're not a part of our organization anymore.
That is perhaps the most powerful example for all of us to end on because it probably sits viscerally with so many of us in terms of how people are let go. So, for all that are listening, we can take David's example. We can just try to internalize that one thing outside of the other myriad of things that he gave us today that are wonderful us to go do. Honor people after they're gone and remember the humanity in it. My friends, thank you so much for being here with David and I today. Be well, lead on, and God bless.